Jeff has, through his reporting, shared photos of overstuffed bins with food rotting in them and mail. I mean, how can you guarantee that everything in that bin will be delivered and on time, especially if it includes a ballot?
Sure. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity. If I could just say a couple of things about today's hearing. I think that the Democrats did an excellent job at wringing several concessions out of the Postmaster General. First, he committed to delivering election mail 95% on time, most within 1 to 2 days. And I think that was an important concession. He indicated that he would process election mail consist as if it were first-class mail, directly contradicting a letter that he sent out or that was sent out to election officials. He also contradicted the president when he said that the Postal Service has the capacity and the resources which are adequate to process election mail. Now, he indicated that he didn't have a developed plan. That's going to be important. But I think people should take away some degree of confidence. But there were, as you indicated, troubling aspects of his testimony. At the beginning of the hearing, Senator Peters conclusively demonstrated that from July, when these initiatives were instituted, till now, there has been a dramatic decline in on-time mail volume. The question then becomes, what's the cause of that delay? And what the Postmaster General said was that his order that trucks would have to leave the plants on time did not cause, unintentional delays because the processing schedule and the transportation schedule did not link up. So basically what he's saying is that when mail's processed and a truck comes to pick it up, the mail's not ready and you tell the truck to leave on time, it's not going to get there on time. The problem, however, Nicole, is that we have internal documents that say that the Postmaster General specifically said leave mail behind. That's not an unintended consequence. That is a deliberate delay of the mail. But let's even assume for a moment that it was unintended. Here you have a major figure, a CEO of 600,000 employee organization who doesn't understand the consequence of making some of these initiative decisions. That certainly is not what I would expect from a CEO of a major corporation. I think also has been pointed out, I think this issue of employee overtime needs to be clearly dug into a little bit more. The internal documents that was just referred to indicate that the employees certainly believed that coming from the Postmaster General was a directive for no overtime, and that had potentially has a direct cause on delay of the mail. With regard to the sorting machines, the Postmaster General argued that he had, because the mail had declined, he had excess capacity, and therefore he could take the sorting machines out of the plants. Well, I think Senator Hassan was particularly probative on this point, where she pointed out that in New Hampshire, you only have one sorting machine. And when that goes down, you have no backup, there's no flexibility, so the mail is going to be delayed. One of the reasons when I was at the Postal Service, we didn't pull out all these machines is because we wanted to make sure we had a fail-safe system. If you have a dramatic increase in mail, such as you're going to have in November, and your mail sorting machine goes down and you've got no flexibility, it's going to cause delays. That then leads to disenfranchise potentially hundreds and thousands of voters. So I think there are significant questions that continue to need to be answered.
Ron, you laid out two scenarios. One was an intentional, telling the trucks to leave before they were full. The other was unintentional. The first one is certainly against a statute that forbids and describes as criminal, retarding mail delivery. The second might enter into a gray area. Do you believe, as Congressman Hakeem Jeffries and Ted Lieu have asked the FBI to examine, do you believe it's worthy of a criminal investigation?
I would say, Nicole, I don't have the answer to that. From my perspective, whether it's intentional or unintentional, the consequences are the same. And for the American public, whether he intended it or not, the mail is being delayed. And I think there's absolutely no question about that. As I said, it has been conclusively demonstrated today, and Postmaster General DeJoy admitted as much. So I don't know whether or not it is criminal or whether he intentionally did it. I do not have the answer to that. I think there are significant questions in light of the documentation that we now have. The documentation says that employees believe they were told deliberately to leave the mail. So there is an inconsistency between the testimony that we heard today and what these documents, and at least what the employees believe.
Let me ask you one final question.
Sure.
Can you unring the bell? Can you put the tube back in the toothpaste? If you don't change the memo that Jeff Bennett read from, the internal documents you're talking about, if you don't immediately today permit overtime in the time of a pandemic and with record numbers of mail-in ballots going out and coming back in, can you meet the require? I mean, can he even keep his own word of guaranteeing that every ballot will be treated as first-class mail and get in on time?
I think it's a significant risk that it will not happen. And from my perspective,
wow,
I think the risk is too high. The risk is our democracy. It is risking disenfranchising hundreds and thousands of voters who the lack of, if their votes don't count, could impact the election. The other thing that is particularly interesting here is that the amount of money that you're talking about saving is minuscule compared to the overall financial stability and health of the Postal Service. The only way the Postal Service gets healthy is really by working with the Congress. And so by alienating the Congress, and you heard that today, where senators are furious about the lack of transparency, the lack of communication, and that is really the only way the Postal Service gets healthy. So you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. I mean, you're getting minuscule savings, but yet you're alienating the very constituency that you're going to need for the financial stability of the Postal Service.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.